Today, we're going to talk about equivalent fractions. Yesterday, we reviewed how to read and write fractions, and today we're going to talk about equivalent fractions. This might be a review for some of you, and that's okay. So here I have all of my fractions. I have my whole, halves, thirds, fourths, fifths, sixths, sevenths, eighths, ninths, and tenths. Now, in our classroom, we would normally have these all laid out in a line or in two rows, and we would be able to see all of them at the same time. However, because my camera can't fit all of these fractions at once, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try, we're going to first find fractions that are equivalent to 1/2, and so I will be taking groups of fractions at a time to test, but we will get through all of them. All right, let's get started. All right, so I want to see which fractions are equivalent to 1/2. To do that, I'm going to see which fractions will take up the same amount of space as 1/2. Let's start with our thirds. Oh, okay, so I can fit 1/3 in there. 1/3 will fit in there. Let's see if I can get 2. Nope. So thirds cannot be equivalent to 1/2. Let's try fourths. Okay. And then, oh, yep. Fourths can be equivalent to 1/2. 2/4 takes up the same amount of space as 1/2. So I'm going to take my 2/4 and I'm going to place them here next to my 1/2 so that we see that they are equivalent. All right, let's look at our next group of fractions. Okay, so we tried our thirds and our fourths, and now we're going to try our fifths and our sixths. Start with fifths. So I can fit one of the fifths, 2 of the fifths. Oh, I can't get another one in there. So my fifths cannot be equivalent to 1/2. Let's take a look at our sixths. There's 1. There's 2. Now before we do this, do you think they're going to be equivalent? Do you think they'll take up the same amount of space? Yes, they do take up the same amount of space. So 1, 2, 3 sixths are equivalent to 1/2. 3 sixths take up the same amount of space as 1/2. So I'm going to put my 3 sixths down here. Okay, let's get our next group. All right, so now we have our sevenths and our eighths. We'll start with our sevenths. Two sevenths, 3 sevenths, oh, nope. It does not want to get in there. So my sevenths cannot be equivalent to 1/2. Let's see about our eighths. 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8. 4/8 is equivalent to 1/2. 4/8 takes up the same amount of space as 1/2. So we'll go ahead and put them down here. I may need to move them closer to be able to fit all of my fractions. All right, let's do our final group. Okay, so now we have our final group. We have ninths and tenths. I moved my fractions over so that we'll have some more space. Let's try our ninths. So there's 1/9, 2/9, 3/9, 4/9, Oh man, 5/9 won't fit. So 9ths cannot be equivalent to 1/2. Oops. And let's try our 10ths. 1/10, 2/10, 3/10. My half piece here is curved up a little bit, so it doesn't want to sit straight in there. So I'm holding it so that I don't have to keep rearranging all the pieces. Okay, 10ths are equivalent. And we can see that 5/10 is equivalent to 1/2. 5/10 takes up the same amount of space as 1/2. So it will go in our last spot. If you can hear my cat meowing, that is Mazel the gray cat. All right, so we can see that we have our 1/2 here, and we can see that 2/4 is equivalent to 1/2, 3/6 are equivalent to 1/2, 4/8 are equivalent to 1/2, and 5/10 are equivalent to 1/2. Next, we're going to look at how to write it. All right, so now we're going to talk about how to write equivalent fractions. So this piece, do you remember what it was called? It was called 1/2, which means that our whole was broken into 2 equal pieces. So that will be our denominator. 2 will be on the bottom. Now, you'll notice that I don't have one of my black lines here, and that's because we're just going to write it. So I will make my black line for fraction. My denominator, my number on the bottom, tells me the fraction family, how many pieces the whole was broken into. In this case, it was 2. I will write 2. 2 is my denominator. And how many pieces are present? Just 1. So the 1 will be my numerator, the number of pieces that are present. 1/2. And we saw that 1/2 takes up the same amount of space as 2/4. So 1/2 is the same as 2/4. So my denominator will be 4 because this whole was broken into 4 pieces. So 4 will be our denominator. 4. And how many fourths are present? 1, 2, 2/4. So 2 is our numerator. And those are equivalent to 3/6. The number that will go on the bottom, our denominator, will be 6 because our whole was broken into 6 equal pieces. So 6, we have our fraction line. And how many 6ths are present? 1, 2, 3. So we write 3/6. And then we have 4/8. So our unit was broken into 8 equal pieces. So 8 will be our denominator, 8ths. And how many 8ths are present? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4/8. And then finally, we had 5/10. So we'll write our fraction line. Our denominator, our fraction family, is tenths. We had a whole and it was broken into 10 equal pieces. So these are tenths. So 10 will be our denominator. And how many tenths are present? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5/10. So all of these fractions, 2/4, 3/6, 4/8, and 5/10, are all equivalent to 1/2. And because they are all equivalent to 1/2, because they all take up the same amount of space as 1/2, they are also all equivalent to each other. Your follow-up work for this is to figure out which fractions are equivalent to 1/3 and which fractions are equivalent to 1/4. The next part to this lesson is talking about other representations of fractions, and we'll see what that means in a minute. All right, so what we've been looking at so far are fractions in the form of a circle or a pie. So something like this. We have a circle and it's divided into equal parts like this. And if I wanted to show 1/4, I would color in one of my 4 pieces and I would write 1/4. However, there are other ways to show fractions within a shape. It's not only circles. So we could have, let's look at a square. We're going to look at several ways we could show fractions in a square. Okay, so I'm going to divide my squares into fourths. So I can have it like this, divided into 4 equal pieces. And if I wanted to color in 1/4, this would be 1/4. I could divide it into 4 equal pieces this way. And color in 1/4. They're not exactly 100% equal because I'm hand drawing it, but you get the idea. Or I could divide it this way into fourths and color in 1/4. Let's look at a different shape. Let's see, we could do a parallelogram. Okay, so I could draw a diagonal line and make this into halves. And I could color one of them, and that would be 1/2. Let's see, I could also do it with a triangle. I could color in 1/2. Or, let's do a hexagon. do my best to make this an equilateral hexagon, but it can be hard. Okay. That's pretty good. All right. So here I have 6 pieces. So my hexagon is divided into sixths. Sixths would be my fraction family. So I can write my fraction bar and sixths. And then let's say I colored in 2 of them. 2 sixths. All right. So those are other ways we can show fractions. It's not always going to be a circle with pieces cut out of it. So your second follow-up work is a worksheet that will be in Google Classroom where you have different other shapes for fractions and you need to either color in or write the fraction that is shown. All right, I'll see you in our next lesson, and bye for now.